Hi everybody, it's Andrea Ankrum with Indivisible Northern Kentucky District 4. Welcome to one of our special episodes of Coffee Klatch Conversations with Candidates. This is part of a series where we are interviewing the candidates who are running in the primary for the Congressional House seat. And so the way that this is set up is a question and answer forum. We have topics already developed, and we are going to post them right now on the site if you're watching live. And if you have questions while you're watching live, please send them to us, and we will ask the questions while we get to that, while we're at that topic. If you have miscellaneous questions that don't fall under one of those topics, we will get to them at the end. So I would like to introduce our guest now, and it's Seth Hall. Welcome.
Welcome.
It's nice. Thank you for coming.
Glad to be here.
Oh, great. Why don't you talk to our audience a little bit about yourself and why you're running for this office?
Great. My name is Seth Hall. I work hard, play by the rules, and love my country, family, God, and community. And I have to tell you, I've had it with a pack of lies, greed, division coming out of Washington. I'm a healthcare businessman that has worked in the industry for 30 years. I developed 1-800 Medicare from a federal contract and hired thousands of workers across the country. My mother died nearly bankrupt due to healthcare cost. Judy, a friend of mine, is retired. She still must work to cover her co-pays of getting to spend time with her instead of spending time with her grandchildren. We need a healthcare system that covers all and allows retirement with dignity and not bankruptcy. Special interests and companies need to pay their fair share of taxes. Frankfurt to Washington, they claim we will get a tax cut. Wrong. If we are to be a united country, those that have been blessed should share in the rewards of living in a civilized democracy. Education is the bedrock of our democracy, and our teachers and education institutions need to be fully funded. Tom Massey travels up to Washington on Tuesday, comes home on Thursday, takes pride in voting no and getting nothing done for Kentucky, except he finds time to vote yes for a tax cut for the special interest, while sticking us and our kids with a $1.5 trillion bill. And to top it off, Massey refuses to hold town halls and hold himself accountable to us who foot the bill. Right. I was born and raised in Henry and Shelby counties and now live in Oldham. I grew up on a tobacco and cattle farm. My dad is a farmer. I grew up on common sense, common decency, and an honest day's work to respect others and give a helping hand to those around us. But I can't sit on the sidelines any longer. To restore decency in this country, good men and women must stand up and say enough is enough of the greed, lies, and division. I'm going to roll up my sleeves like I have my entire life and work to help Kentuckians get a raise. We're going to get it done. Now, I know what world Mr. Massey comes from, but where I come from, in the real world called Kentucky, if you only show up for work 1 or 2 days a week, take pride in doing absolutely nothing, and insult your customers to boot, you get fired. I'm asking you to hire me, Seth Hall, and vote for me this Tuesday.
Great.
Thanks.
So we're going to jump right into our topics, and the first one is going to be about the economy. So I'm going to read a little information here. The national unemployment rate is at a 17-year low of 4.1% for the consecutive months in March, or for the 6th consecutive month in March. The stock market is at an all-time high. However, wages for most of us continue to be stagnant, and many of the jobs that have been added are either low-paying or temporary. According to the Kentucky Center for Economic Policy, the majority of job growth in Kentucky is in low-wage jobs. 8 of the 10 most common occupations in our state, according to job projections, through 2024, pay less than $15 an hour on average, and 3 pay less than $10 an hour. Just 2 of these 10 occupations require an associate's degree or higher. In Kentucky, 76.5% of jobs are in occupations that have median annual pay below 200% of the poverty level for a family of 4. Kentucky ranks 9th worst in the nation on that measure. How would you address the issue of working class people not getting ahead in this current environment of pro-corporations? And what legislation would you introduce or support to ensure companies have to pay a living wage?
Well, I think one thing that we need to look at immediately is prevailing wage. I think we need to retire prevailing wage and also institute prevailing wage. And, I'm sorry, and also get right to work.
I was going to
back.
ask you to explain that.
And get right to work back. I also want to expand the opportunity for people for government contracts. I worked on a government contract when I heard Medicare, and what I would like to do is add on as a criteria at the federal level that preferential treatment is given to companies that have unions, and that those union jobs, it would add points onto the contract bidding process. And I think that is one way. Another way is infrastructure. I think if we bring in infrastructure jobs, now Thomas Massey doesn't bring back any jobs. He doesn't bring back any projects. He does nothing for us in the 4th District. Our congressperson, myself, would bring back and get on the Appropriations Committee and bring back projects and infrastructure jobs to the 4th District. And with those jobs, give us the opportunity to hire quality people.
So you've talked about work incentives for corporations to create more jobs. What type of work incentives or incentives for corporations would you bring into play to get these corporations to hire, to create more jobs, and to pay the wage?
Well, I think one disincentive maybe we need to take away is that we need to, if they're going to put their jobs overseas, then they need to pay a tax for that.
Okay. What about increasing the minimum wage at the national level?
I think that's one of the things to give Kentuckians a raise that we need to look at. But also, I want to look at the opportunity to provide unions into our service industry for fast food, etc.
So do you think that $15 an hour is a good place to start, or would you go higher than that?
Well, we're at $7.25 right now, and I think a gradual increase up to 15 would be a start to get us there.
So,
but there's a lot of things I hear about out in the industry, out in the country when I talk about minimum wage. A lot of people feel like when you say minimum wage, they feel like that you're just taking care of one sector of people, and they don't want to give minimum wage increases because they feel like they need a wage increase because they don't get to participate.
Right.
So, while in one hand you say minimum wage, yes, we want to increase it, but on the other hand, I want to make sure that all Kentuckians are getting a raise, and that comes from all kinds of activities, and that's supporting your unions. It's from providing farmers additional income through subsidies. It's providing union jobs into the restaurants. It's leveling the playing field for the worker class.
Okay. How would you revitalize the hardest hit manufacturing communities?
Once again, I think we're going to look at infrastructure jobs. We've got to bring back infrastructure, prop up healthcare. Healthcare employs thousands of people. It's one of the fastest growing sectors in Kentucky, and we could prop up, and they're nice paying jobs. So we need to prop those up.
So how would you work to, so say, we've had these manufacturing jobs that have gone away, and people are looking for work and they're not skilled. They don't have the skill level. How would you, at the federal level, try to help dislocated workers here in the state of Kentucky?
Well, I think there's some job training that we can do. We can provide training. For example, one of my platforms on there is, free college, free trade schools up to a certain income level, and that would help provide opportunity for people to get an education.
Recently, the dairy farmers in the state have come under dire circumstances with Walmart developing its own processing plant and subsequent contract with Dean Foods. What do you propose to do if elected to help them?
Well, the dairy farmers have a particular problem. It's not just Walmart. There's a surplus supply of milk, and they've put the farmers into the free market. And we need to take the farmers back out of the market and provide price supports like we used to. For the health of the nation, we have to have safe milk. And it requires that milk be a certain price in order to do that. And that's one thing that I'm going to be looking at.
Okay, great. So we're going to move on to tax reform. The Republican Tax Reform and Jobs Act of 2017 was supposed to simplify the tax laws and give a tax break to everyone. But the tax cuts were not aimed at helping the lower and middle class. Instead, corporate tax rates were cut from 35% to 21%, and the wealthiest Americans will see the largest tax breaks. You have stated as part of your platform, shift the tax burden from the working class to the wealthy by creating equitable corporate and personal taxes and fees. So can you explain that a little bit more? What would you do to change that tax law that they just put into place?
Well, one thing is repeal it. The tax scam needs to be repealed, and I want to give a call out to Indivisible. I attended the Indivisible protest march at Frankfurt, as well as in Louisville, and one of the few candidates to do so. And we need to repeal that. We need to take it back, because that added one. There are some studies showing 1.5, but I read one today saying 2.9 trillion being added back to the deficit.
Wow.
And we need to add that money back in. Now, on working class citizens, I want to leave what's in place and restore some of the deductions.
Right. That would be, because I think we don't know what's going to happen right now, right? We've been told that we don't get to do deductions anymore.
That's right.
But we don't understand at this point how it's going to affect us until next year.
Yeah, the mortgage deduction's gone.
Right. And I'm sure,
and that's a big one.
The education, I do a lot of deductions. I, pay my son's tuition at UK, and I'm thinking all of that is going to be gone. So it's a little bit
disturbing.
Concerning. Yeah, exactly.
Disturbing.
Do you think that this current tax reform bill will help small businesses grow? It seems like it was aimed at the corporations. And if not, what are your ideas to help this sector of our economy? Sometimes the small businesses seem to get left behind.
Yeah, I think they got left behind. I mean, this is for the corporations. This is a great gift for the corporations. It's not going to add any more jobs. And actually, it didn't do what it was supposed to do. Also, was to drive up the stock market. You mentioned earlier about the best stock market we've ever had, but we really haven't had the best stock market. The stock market at one point was the best, but it's fallen several thousand points, and it's back to where we were at under Obama.
Right.
So basically, we are still stagnant on the economy, and of course, the stock market's not an indicator of growth for the industry.
It doesn't
the company
represent the working class at all.
No, it doesn't represent the working class at all.
Right. So, how will you? What would your tax reform ideas to help small businesses? Do you have anything in particular to help that sector of the economy?
Well, I think we have to provide them their tax cuts in order to get the revenue that they need. And then also we need to take health care off small business and put that back into the Affordable Care Act.
Okay. So let's talk about health care then. You quoted Jimmy Kimmel under the health care section of your platform as follows: "No parent should have to decide if they can afford to save their child's life." And you're talking about the ACA, we just mentioned that. Both of your primary opponents support Medicare for all. You talk about protecting the Affordable Care Act and changing it to make it better. You've also stated that you aren't sure our economy is ready for Medicare for all. Why is that?
Well, I want to prop up the Affordable Care Act and put back in the risk corridor that was taken out. Also, the mandate needs to be restored. That was taken out through the tax scam. Both of those are important for premium price decreases. And I want to keep the Affordable Care Act in simply because lots of jobs are tied around billing insurance companies.
Right.
And we talked a little bit about it before we started. Those jobs in cost containment, through all those medical doctors, nurses, et cetera, are employed by insurance companies. And if we immediately go to Medicare for all, we will unemploy medical billers, insurance agents, even where I work. I mean, that company.
So we have to look at the effect on.
We have to look at the effect of the entire economy, because what we would be doing is literally, since healthcare is one of the largest growing sectors today, we would be removing thousands of the best paying jobs out of the economy again. Just like manufacturing going overseas, we're now removing those jobs out, and we just cannot make that leap right to Medicare for all.
Well, do you think that those jobs then would be available through the Medicare system? Because it's typically, and correct me if I'm wrong, but Medicare contracts with health insurance companies to do their billing.
Well, it depends on the model you choose. I mean, you could go to still a for-profit model and then still have the insurance companies being a part of Medicare. Or you could go to the Medicare fee-for-service model, and everybody is just in Medicare, and then you just file your claim to one place.
Right.
That's the model I'm talking about.
Okay. So what are the fixes? You talked about the risk corridor and the mandate. Are there other fixes to the ACA that you would try to implement? Because there were some sectors of the country that felt like the premiums are too high, or they didn't want to be forced to have health insurance, or there were other things about the ACA that people complained about, basically.
Well, the risk corridor was removed from the program before Trump. That was part of the Budget Act of under Obama that he had to sign because he didn't have a line item veto. So the risk corridor was taken out. That's when the premium prices went up.
Okay.
So if we restored the risk corridor, which really just helps pay for the high risk patients, then we can provide lower premiums.
Neither of your opponents have ever specifically mentioned women's reproductive rights or healthcare issues, yet you felt strongly enough to include it in your platform in black and white. Why? Why do you think that's such an important issue?
Well, women's health issues are important to me. I mean, women are 51% of the population. Right. So, I figure that I've got to take care of my constituency
right.
from one reason. And then also for the second reason, I think it's, it's just important. Planned Parenthood is an organization that provides a lot of benefit, and it's not an abortion clinic. Right. I mean, it provides health care to thousands of women and men.
Right. And so how do we kind of reverse the trend that's happening? They're being closed. They're there's a stigma associated with a lot of people, don't want. A lot of people on the right don't like Planned Parenthood because they think it provides, the only thing it does are these abortions. So how do we change the narrative on that to make everybody understand how important it is?
Well, I am more than just, I'm not pro. I'm not. Here's what the Republicans are. They're pro-birth. So you have the baby, and then they will do nothing for you. After that, no income, no, they starve the baby. They don't do anything for the baby or through that person's life. So I want to call, if you're going to be pro-life, then you be pro-life throughout the life of that person. Right. We don't send them to war. We don't have these perpetual wars. We don't have a situation where we don't fund or feed our children.
Right. So there's a question that came in online. What about the ability for Medicare to negotiate drug prices? So this is a big, drug prices are very high for many of our drugs. How does the government fit into that, being able to lower some of these drug prices?
Well, we should allow government to negotiate and for Medicare, and that has been forbidden.
By whom?
It's written into the law that formed the Part D.
Part D Medicare.
Part D Medicare.
So that would have to be changed.
Yes.
And do you think that would be possible?
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm in Congress, so I'm hoping that I could, be able to do something and present that legislation, go forward. Other things is that the pharmaceutical industry consists of what's called PBMs, pharmacy benefit managers, and these organizations are like the mafia. They control all the drugs. They control what your insurance company pays for drugs, and they control how the drugs move through the networks. As a matter of fact, you cannot go to a pharmacy. You don't even get a choice in how to negotiate yourself in what your drug prices are going to be.
Right.
Because, that was a misconception that one of the previous congressional candidates had, that you could choose how you selected your medication. But you don't get to choose, because that's called out-of-network. You go out-of-network, your costs go up tremendously.
Right.
So you've got to stay in network. And that's what the drug scam, sort of what is going on, is this shell game of you've got to buy the drugs from, for example, CVS.
Right.
And CVS controls the PBM. And CVS is now so wealthy, they're buying the insurance company, Aetna.
Right. So it seems like a kind of rigged system.
It's a little bit rigged.
Okay. Let's see here. Many health insurance companies are for-profit businesses with stockholders to appease. This takes money away from actual healthcare services and keeps premiums high, right? Because they're like the middleman, and they've got these stockholders to take care of. Would you consider submitting legislation to repeal the Health Maintenance Organization Act of 1973? And do you think that could be something that we would benefit from, repealing that? Because it seems like that is the law. That's the bill that made health care, health insurance
for profit. I would have to take that into consideration, and there are so many ramifications of where we're at today, and it's such a massive industry that I have to be careful in my consideration of what I want to do. And undoing all of what has been done is a big effort. That may once again create the unemployment situation that I talked about earlier in Medicare for All.
Well, there are some health insurance companies that are not for profit, like I think Blue Cross Blue Shield might be.
No, they sold their rights.
Oh, okay.
When they sold, maybe a couple of them are still left. But I mean, they basically, what they did, here's what Anthem did in Kentucky. They sold their rights to the state of Kentucky for, it was a few $1 million. They were literally worth, and the state of Kentucky should have got this, $1 billion. And they didn't. But they gave up, that right to go from mutual company to a private company, stock-owned company.
Okay, so it seems like we've got some issues there.
Yeah.
What about the opioid crisis and the pharmaceutical companies? Would you consider doing something at the federal level to try to regulate the prescribing of these opioids?
Absolutely. But I think it almost needs to go hand in hand with medical marijuana. Medical marijuana has been shown as a good substitute for opioids. it attaches, the medical marijuana attaches to the receptors in the brain better. The opioids attach the receptors and rewrite the brain to say, I always need this drug.
Right.
And so, and a close friend of mine had a friend, I mean, her son died 2 weeks before graduation at UK.
Ooh.
And we went to the funeral, and it was a very trying thing that happened. And I've been trained on administering Narcan. I thought while traveling the district, I might run across that like Andy Bashir did.
Right.
And I've gone to an opioid training class and been certified in opioid.
You've seen it up close.
Yes.
Yeah. So you are in support of medical marijuana legalization at the federal level.
Yes.
Okay, we're going to move on to energy. What specific ideas do you have to reverse the direction the current administration is headed with regards to energy? Because they are pro-fossil fuel, offshore drilling, oil pipelines, fracking, and coal mining.
Yeah, and all that drives towards climate change. And we cannot afford to continue to go down this path of fossil fuels. One reason this administration's for that is because it's vested interest in money. That is the old infrastructure. That's the old way of thinking about things. That's the old way of doing business. And I think we need to look at options in renewable energy. Solar energy, the sun is free. And, building the solar farms are not free, but we can do it. I know Christina mentioned about California putting solar panels on every home.
Right.
Hawaii is, they may already be or subject to soon be free of fossil fuels.
Right. So how do we get the rest of us on board with that?
Well, it's going to be hard work and changing mindset because there's lots of jobs to be created in wind and solar. And I would think that people, instead of being in the mines getting black lung, would rather be outside putting in solar panels. And it's not a big training leap to get there.
Because I know I bought a hybrid car a couple years ago, and we got a tax break for it, and I think that has gone away now. So would you encourage those?
I would encourage those type of tax breaks to be added back, absolutely.
Yeah. If we have deductions, which we're not sure we're having deductions anymore, but they may be, it's some other incentive. There may be some other incentive, not just through taxes. So, some argue that it's too late to bring the solar industry to Kentucky as a permanent source of jobs and to boost the economy because we waited so long to attempt the transition. What do you think about that?
I don't know. Why would we waited? I don't think we've waited too long. I mean, we may be late.
Holding on to that coal, though.
Yeah, we got 22 coal jobs in the district. In the 4th district, there's 22 coal jobs. I think we can retrain those 22 jobs to do something with solar energy. And, just the fact that, we've been late to the game doesn't mean we're out of the game. I think we can still, change this. We can.
Do you think that there should be something at the federal level that encourages states to move in that direction? Instead of just letting the states do what they like. Okay, California is really into it, but Kentucky may not be as into it. But if we want to move the country in that direction, is there something that could be done at the federal level?
I mean, we could bring back projects. We could bring back infrastructure projects such as solar energy and wind farms to Kentucky.
We're going to talk about foreign policy. Since Trump took office in January of 2017, the U.S. military presence and activity in Yemen and Somalia have greatly increased, largely under the radar of average citizens. Like, it's not being talked about. U.S. troops died last year in both conflicts, yet he didn't mention either in his State of the Union address. There was a 140% increase in spending on our activities in Yemen, and we have more than doubled the number of troops and U.S. airstrikes in Somalia while adding 2 new military headquarters there. Why are we involved in these conflicts? And what should our national role in these matters be?
Well, that's because we've outsourced our military to the United Arab Emirates, and their vested interest is to take over Yemen, who is their natural enemy, and then Somalia pirates are hijacking their ships as they come through the straits. So we are doing the bidding through a war for the UAE.
So how would Congress stop that? It seems like they're supposed to be.
They have no accountability. Well, they should have accountability for it. They don't act as though they have accountability.
Right.
We have one system of government, and that's a Republican government. And they are just not going to question him.
Because it seems like when President Obama was in office and there was the Syria, there were things happening in Syria, and he talked about the red line, and they wouldn't, he was following the rules and trying to get Congress's approval before doing things there, and they didn't let him, and then they talked bad about him, basically. But now it seems like that's not happening. So how do we get that back?
Well, we got to elect Democrats.
Yeah. Right. Because we need that accountability.
That's right. If we had Democrats or we had Democrats that were controlling Congress, we would hold Trump accountable.
With the Afghanistan and Syrian wars seemingly never ending, and even with Iraq, where should our priorities lie? Should we get out of there? Should we continue?
Here's what we have. For example, today, we have outsourced many parts of our Army. So food services, security, all these entities have been outsourced. Well, the only way they make money is to have perpetual war. We've got to get the outsourcing out of our military and put our military back in the hands of the Army.
So what do you think about the increase in the military budget?
I was reading in Forbes that the increase in the military budget, there's $6 trillion. I had to read this 2 times. $6 trillion that they cannot account for. $6 trillion, you know what that would pay for? That would pay for all the stuff that we've been talking about.
Right.
That they don't have any records of spending it.
So we need to...
the Defense Department, just like every other department, needs to be held accountable. We have a great military, and I am not slamming the military at all, but those accountants that should be accountable for that money, they need to prove where that's gone.
Okay, we're going to talk about the Second Amendment. The argument that I've heard against stricter gun ownership laws is why punish law-abiding, responsible gun owners with more restrictions. What do you say to that argument?
Well, I don't think we are. If you're a responsible gun owner, I don't think you're being punished. We're just looking to have background checks on the irresponsible ones and hopefully catch a few of those before they kill more of our children.
But why do you think people say, why do I have to go through more of this? I'm not going to commit a crime. How do we show people that this is beneficial for everybody and it should be at the federal level?
I think the universal background checks has got fairly high approval rating. It was something like 80-90%. Yeah. So
why isn't it happening?
Because once again, we have to throw the bums out. We have to put Democrats in there and elect them. And it's only people like me that you're going to be able to put in there and get this job done.
So can you elaborate on the background checks? What specifically needs to be improved on? Because there are background checks. It's just inconsistent. From state to state. Is there something, nationwide?
Well, we can close the gun show loophole, basically.
We talk about, how long have we been talking about that? It just seems like...
But we're going to keep talking about it as long as Republicans control the House and Senate.
Do you feel like gun ownership laws are a state level issue or a federal issue, because each state has its own laws, and some states are very strict and some states are very lax. And we have seen in Chicago, Illinois has stricter gun laws, but then people go to Indiana
and buy the guns and bring them over to Chicago. Yeah.
And so how do we, should it be a state level?
I think it probably should be a federal level. We've got to look at a minimum, a federal level, and then other subcomponents or sub-laws could be state.
Okay, what specific measures would you introduce or support in particular to address domestic violence gun owners and the ability of mentally ill people to legally obtain guns?
Well, I would like to undo what was recently approved in allowing the mentally ill to have guns.
Right. So repealing, I guess it wouldn't be it would be reinstating that because it was. But what about the domestic violence gun owners who, repeatedly, I think, just recently we had 2 police officers killed in Columbus, Ohio, by somebody, a gun owner who had multiple domestic violence calls to his house, and then he ends up killing 2 cops because his guns were never taken away. So how do we do that?
Well, I think we've got to allow our law enforcement to do the appropriate thing and report these type of people up to a central area that can manage domestic abuse.
So do you think there should be a database of gun owners so they could...
Oh, yeah, there should be a database.
And that will come from the background checks.
But we have databases today. We just don't have them connected.
So they could be in different states or different cities, right? I don't know if they even talk to each other.
That's right.
City to city.
Yeah.
At the state
we need
level.
to have a connected database.
Okay, we're going to move on to education. And public education seems to be under attack these days. Public schools are underfunded, and the Secretary of Education is pro-charter and private schools. We continue to say that we want our children to have the best education in the world and expect them to have the highest test scores, but we don't provide enough funding for this to be possible. When this happens, we can't recruit and retain good teachers. Thomas Massey has introduced a bill that would eliminate the Department of Education because he feels that each state should be in control of how they educate their students. What are your thoughts on, what specifically would you do to support public education in the United States at the federal level?
Well, I would not do away with the Department of Education. That's my first step. I would propose that at the Department of Education level, we would maintain that and then also fully fund, as we need to do, with infrastructure, money, etc., our schools. And then also I'd like to add back in teachers into Social Security. I think teachers need to be added into Social Security and also get survivor benefits.
How would we, you have stated in your platform to provide a free and high-quality education for every person from preschool through college and or vocational education. How do we pay for this, or how do we go about doing that for everybody?
Well, if you remember, there was $6 trillion that in the military budget that was not accounted for. I mean, if we get to account for all this money, I think we have programs or ways to pay for it. Also, we got to undo the tax scam that was passed and apply that.
And you've also stated that we need to hold colleges accountable for controlling costs and making tuition affordable. How would we do that?
Could you ask that again?
You had stated that we need to hold colleges accountable for controlling costs because the tuition keeps rising, and make tuition affordable again because it's really out of control. Well,
I think there's been some opportunity that the colleges have taken that they haven't been fully accountable for what money has been given to them either. And that's what I mean there. But also, we need to be able to fully fund our public universities so that people up to a certain income do have free college.
That would be great. Student loan debt could be the next housing market crisis, right? We've got all of these young people coming out of college with massive amount of debt. How can the federal government support students trying to get a higher education without being saddled with massive debt? And I know you just talked about making it free up to a certain level, but we have all of these people now who have this massive debt. What specific programs would you support to help alleviate this financial burden on our young workers?
Well, I'd like to continue with the efforts under the Obama administration. They proposed allowing people to have work credits, and then those credits would help pay for the student loans. You could volunteer. You could provide other types of tax deductions.
What about the actual student loans themselves? Some of them, I know when I had my student loan, it was 8%. Would you be in favor of lowering the interest rates?
Absolutely. I mean, they need to borrow at the same rate the federal government does, which was 0.5%.
Oh my gosh. Because, you borrow a certain amount and you're paying it back double, and it's just taking years and years and years.
Yes.
So decreasing the interest rate. Okay. We're talking about immigration. The president continuously says that Democrats are weak on borders and want undocumented immigrants to pour into the country, in effect having open borders. He also wants $25 billion for a border wall, which he thinks will stop these immigrants from coming in. What is your take on the current administration's war on immigration and the constant attack on Democrats about this issue? Are these undocumented immigrants pouring into the United States? Is a border wall the answer?
No, I mean, immigrants are not flowing into the country. Actually, we have the biggest reduction in immigrants coming to this country than we've ever had. The wall, $25 billion for the wall. If we don't have $25 billion for education, if we don't have $25 billion for all these other infrastructure projects, and we cannot build a wall. I mean, if you want to build the wall, that's the one thing I'd privatize. Or privatize the wall.
Well, Mexico was supposed to pay for it.
Yeah,
right?
Mexico was supposed to pay for it.
Yeah.
And the other thing about a wall is that people can go around it, and they can go over it, and they can go under it. So I don't understand the purpose of a wall.
So what specifically would you think that we need to fix with the immigration system now? I was just reading in the paper the other day that some of the migrant workers that come in and help the farmers they're not coming now, and these farmers are going to lose their crops because...
Well, they're losing their crops now. I mean, there's crops rotting in the field today, and that's going to cause grocery prices to increase. And as long as we've got this attitude towards immigrants, we're going to continue to have our prices go up.
So do you think that the current system is working? Or are there things that need to be? What are the things that need to be fixed?
Well, we've got to fix DACA.
Yes.
I mean, we've got to. Those citizens, those people have been here all their lives. They don't know any other country, and it wasn't their fault. They were brought here. Yeah. I mean, they're by their parents.
Right.
So we need to allow those people to stay, and that equates to. In Kentucky alone, an additional $4 million. If we legalize DACA, that equates to an additional $4 million a year. If we deport everybody, we've got to pick up an additional $8 million.
Sounds like it's important to get that done.
Important.
I know a lot of people want to get that done. Okay, so we're going to talk about trade. The president believes that the U.S. economy is suffering due to the many bad trade deals we are in. China, NAFTA, Europe. He has stated that trade wars are good for us and easy to win. Currently, he has proposed to increase tariffs on imported steel, and in return, China has retaliated by decreasing orders of American soybeans. We should continue to expect this type of volatility as long as this current administration does not have a clear plan on trade. What can you do as a representative in Congress to help farmers, industry workers, and consumers through this time of market instability due to the president's plan, his trade wars, basically?
Yeah, his trade wars have definitely, for example, Russia just bought, China just bought from Russia their soybeans, which they were going to buy from us, but now $45 million worth of soybeans are going to be setting and not sold. The trade wars are, you don't win any war. A war is about creating chaos, and there's no way to win it. So we need to have some of these agreements back in place. The world depends upon the United States for stability, and we have to be shown as the sign of stability, and we have to be. And we have to honor these agreements. Just like backing out of these agreements, like the climate exchange in Paris and then the Iran deal, that creates instability in the world. Right. And if we're going to be a great country, we have to take our leadership position back.
And I guess, how can Congress kind of counteract what is happening? He's doing these things because it's part of his...
It's part of the executive branch, yeah.
Right, but how can Congress kind of stabilize things?
Well, Congress has to come back into the hands of the Democratic Party. I keep coming back to that, but it's not going to change until that happens. And we've got to elect Democrats.
Okay, we've talked a little bit about this, but infrastructure. Our nation's infrastructure is crumbling. Bridges. We have one here that goes across the Ohio River, the Wind Spence Bridge, that is falling apart. Roads, water systems, Flint, Michigan, Martin County, Kentucky.
Absolutely.
We need to invest heavily in repairing and maintaining our infrastructure and investing in new utilities, such as internet access everywhere. The current administration wants to sell our infrastructure to private corporations who will then charge us to use them.
Yeah.
No. What are your specific ideas for repairing our nation's infrastructure, and how will we pay for it? And what priorities are for District 4?
Well, one priority is the Brent Spence Bridge. That's while we were up there at the Mayfest, we were right next to it, and for me, I'm not here every day, right. So I get to see that firsthand, and that
drive across it.
That's scary. There's big chunks of concrete missing out of that, and 3% of the of interstate traffic goes across that for the nation.
Right.
So we've got to get that replaced. And I'm not in favor of tolls. We've got to look at not privatizing. This stuff is for the common good. We have to get back to taking care of each other and get this greed out of society. Greed is driving this.
Absolutely. And there was an online question about infrastructure. What role does organized labor play in infrastructure building and keeping our country moving towards a modern infrastructure?
And absolutely. It plays a vital role. Infrastructure jobs, because we don't have any, and we have a Republican administration which has put in right to work and done away with
the strength of the unions. Yeah.
We've got to add these. We've got to add this stuff back in. Unions are extremely vital, and we need them to.
So would you go back to I think we talked about it at the beginning, giving companies who have unions incentives. So maybe for this infrastructure, they would get an extra points like you had talked about.
That's right. For the federal jobs, they would get extra points. They would get preferential treatment, yes.
Okay, so those are all the topics that we had specifically when we have a few miscellaneous questions here. What will you do at the federal level to improve and increase overall transparency? A lot of stuff seems to take place in the back rooms, and people aren't being able to read bills and all sorts of things like that.
once again, that's only happening under the Republican administration. This didn't happen under Democratic administrations. We've got to have open government and transparency, and I'll work towards that, but we have to have a Democratic majority.
And I was looking through your platform, and you had talked about something called you had worked on the Cultural Diversity Work Team. Can you explain what that was about?
Yes, and one of my jobs, I had the Cultural Diversity Work Team in Waterloo, Iowa, for 1-800-MEDICARE when it first started out. It started out with 13 people, and I had several other companies that I also worked for. And the lady that started this has since passed, but she created cultural diversity, and it was recognized by the Clinton White House. And we implemented cultural diversity at a company called Afina, and we shared cultures, different cultures about what's going on with different types of people and understanding different types of people and how to work with them.
So within that company?
And within the company we created.
And was it spread to other companies? How was that? Sometimes you do that within a company or within a department in a company, and then you can spread it around.
This was a self-contained facility in Waterloo, Iowa, so it spread throughout the company because I was in charge of the company. But
it sounds like something that could be made available to other.
That's right. It could be. And lots of companies have this. I mean, I got the idea from a previous company that I worked at. We had cultural diversity programs because the year 2000 was coming out, and there was supposed to
Y2K, right?
Yeah, and we implemented it just to share diversity among ourselves, and sexual harassment and all that type of training was provided to us.
Do you think that should be something that every company should be mandated to have in place?
Absolutely.
Okay. What will be your number one priority when you get to Washington?
Infrastructure. I think it's the one thing that's going to drive jobs, creation. It takes care of education. It takes care of many of the ills that we have going on today. Our company, we need to rebuild America, and it's deteriorating today, and we need to rebuild it.
Great. What election voting reforms are needed at a federal and state level to protect and strengthen our democracy and encourage more Kentuckians or even more Americans? I mean, we know that maybe 30% of the population voted. Give specifics and include your thoughts on topics like gerrymandering, dark money, paper ballots, automatic voter registration. Are there some things that we can do to encourage people to vote and get some of these issues out of the way that seem like barriers to voting?
Yeah, I'd like to have a federal holiday for voting.
That would be great.
But there's been a lot of initiatives that have been done, such as allowing paper ballots to be mailed in. And
in some states, right? It doesn't seem like
but we could. We could do that on a national level, and we definitely need something about gerrymandering. We need independent committees that are set up in each state to decide on how the districts are organized.
Yeah. What about
because the 4th district needs to be?
Yeah,
it is a big district.
Yeah. What about dark money and Citizens United?
Absolutely, that needs to be overturned.
And then what about requiring disclosure of tax returns for presidential?
Absolutely. Yes.
Can we make that? Is that something the federal government can make mandatory, or is that a state level issue?
No, we can do that. That has to be done at the federal level.
Okay. And what about term limits?
I'm not fond of term limits, but I'm going to term limit myself to 4 terms.
So that would be for the House
8
years. So what about senators?
Well, I hadn't got there yet.
But we've got a senator that's been there.
I know,
for
but
decades.
Absolutely, but the people get to elect him, and the people keep electing him. People are up there as long as they need to be to get a project done or something that they had an idea of, and I feel like they need to be there.
Do you think, though, it would change the way people did things if they knew they only had a certain amount of time, or that they didn't have that pressure of the re-election, like you're in your last term, kind of like the president, I guess. You know that you're not going to be. You could be. You stop worrying about the special interests. I think.
Well, it was the Republicans that put in the term limits on the president because a Democrat held it for 4 terms. Franklin Roosevelt, and people loved him. So the term limits are brought up every time the Republicans want to get in, they bring up the term limits. And it's a good red bait to bring the voters out. But they never implement it.
Right.
They've got full control of everything right now, and they don't implement it.
Right. Yep. Okay, that's all of our questions. So if you want to take a couple minutes here and talk to our audience and talk to them about voting on Tuesday and why they should vote for you.
Well, the 4th District has some real issues that need real solutions. Our roads and bridges are dangerously in need of repair, our water systems are outdated, and we need high-speed internet access and improved phone service. We deserve a congressman who will make on improving infrastructure a priority. These projects will create good-paying local jobs and spur growth throughout the Commonwealth, thus giving Kentuckians a raise. Special interest and big corporations are threatening our family farms and Kentucky agriculture as a whole, protecting our local farmers. Will be something I'll do every day in Congress. I support farm price supports and protecting our local food sources. These aren't talking points for me. These affect my family as well as all families. Everyone has a right to a livable wage, affordable health care that actually works, and the ability to retire with dignity. I'm Seth Hall, and I appreciate your vote on this coming Tuesday to help install a compassionate, competent, and courageous person. Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
And thank you to everybody for watching. And please, you can watch this again on our Facebook channel or our YouTube channel as well. And join us again for another episode coming up in the summer. Thanks, everybody.